Thank you for finding us. No Stoplights with Ken Ard. I'm Ken Ard. I want to thank our sponsors, Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Pepsi of Florence, Micky Finn's, McCall Farms, PLC Commercial Real Estate, Florence County Legislative Delegation. We will reformat this podcast. We've said that some of these things we're working on, and some of these things we're striving toward. I've had a lot of interaction with our sponsors about our next step on this journey. We told you over the holidays that we moved to a new studio, our own property here. We're not living out of a suitcase any longer. And as part of that, it was kind of a stages of adaptation, and we're taking the final step into what I don't want to say anything yet because we don't have it. We got it finalized, but we don't have the logistics worked out quite yet. But sooner than later, this podcast will take on kind of a new life. Our sponsors will take on a new role as we progress. But none of this is possible. None of this growth that we try to enjoy. And by that, I mean, we didn't know our ass from third base when we began in the world of podcasting. We had built somewhat of a reputation in radio, but in the digital space, we just really and truly started from scratch. We're into this about a year. And we progressed, but not as well as I'd like to. But once again, Rome was not built in a day. I was not the foreman, so I don't know that I'll ever be happy or satisfied with our rate of progress. But none of this is possible, and I mean this sincerely. The sponsors know my vision and where I'd love for the end game to be, and they have been very much supportive of what we're trying to do. So thank you again. And I want to mention them again: Florence County Legislative Delegation, PLC Commercial Real Estate, McCall Farms, Micky Finn's, Pepsi of Florence, Carolina Bank, Francis Marion University, MPD Electric Co-op, and Victor's. They have been gracious and very supportive of what we're in the process of aspiring to be. Donald Trump. It's Thursday at about 4:20 or 4:40 on a Thursday afternoon on the week that Donald Trump was inaugurated president of the United States. I don't know how long it takes to publish and edit and download all this nonsense that I spew over the internet, but it's been a very eventful week. It's been kind of a transitioning from one president to another. That's always an exciting time. I was thinking about it this morning a little bit. You know, there's this theory in America today that we're so divided, we kind of sort of need to, build a moat in the middle of America, and you get on your side and I get on my side. I have a worldview. Some of you share my worldview. Some of you don't share my worldview, and I'm certainly respectful of those that don't. Most of you that don't. I'm respectful of that. But I was thinking about it as we were transitioning from President Biden to President Trump. We kind of sort of do that, whether we like it or not. I have lived in Joe Biden's America for 4 years. I've got friends of mine who don't care much for Donald Trump. They will live in Donald Trump's America for the next 4 years. I'm not saying it's a dictatorship, but the American president has enormous authority and power and sway and influence, not only legislatively, but in the bully pulpit. I mean, what the president says carries a lot of weight. I don't care how bombastic in Trump's case or diminished in Biden's case. It's still a job that sets the temperature politically for where the country is and where it's headed. So when we argue, let's build a fence in the middle of America and you get on your side and I get on mine and I won't be angry with you and you won't be angry. We kind of sort of do that when we transition from one president of one political party to another of the other political party. I was not a happy camper. I'm a Republican. I was not a happy camper in a lot of what Joe Biden did. Democrats probably won't be a happy camper in regards to a lot of what Donald Trump is going to do. In fact, they're not very happy about some of the things Trump has already done. And I'm not a scholar. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a student, and I'm a student of history. And I guess I'm a political junkie. So I do try to, and I am of average intelligence. So I take it upon myself to try and understand some of these issues and the nuances of the issues and what needs to happen here and what needs to happen over there. One of the things Donald Trump has done in the early days of his presidency is executive orders. He he's passed or signed into law. He's signed into action about 197 executive orders. I stopped short of saying that's a law because the big law is established through the legislative process. And then it gets litigated. Does it stand the test of time or not? Executive orders are more spontaneous, reflective of, once again, the transition from one American president to another. But as Donald Trump passed or signed into law 197 executive orders, about half, a little less than half, were rescinding some of the Biden executive orders. President Biden did X. Donald Trump didn't agree with that. He comes along and says, strike through that with an executive order that rescinds what President Biden did. But there were about, 100 or so executive orders addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. There'll be some addressing DOGE, but the majority of Trump's focus, and I would argue the strongest wind in his sail, is his fairly aggressive stance on immigration. You read polls across America, and the American public believe that we need a secure border. The American public believe that we need an orderly way to enter our country. Now, once again, you've got zealots that kind of stand for open border, and you've got kind of a zealot on the other side that says, I don't want a damn soul that doesn't look like me and sound like me to live in America. I'd like to believe I'm pragmatic when it comes to immigration. I do believe that first and foremost, we need to secure our border, and we need to demand and insist and require people who come from wherever they choose to come from to obey our laws. The word illegal has to mean illegal, or let's just change it and say undocumented, and I wish they weren't here. But once again, when you enter our country illegally, you're breaking our law. When you enter our country illegally, it creates a situation that America finds itself in, and this is where the immigration issue that I am paying closest attention to kind of rears its head, and that is birthright citizenship. Now, I want to begin by saying the public need to be educated about birthright citizenship. It's not, my stance is I am not a supporter of birthright citizenship. I believe the 14th Amendment is a bit open-ended. I think the citizenship clause in the 14th Amendment is a bit open-ended, and I'll get to that in a couple of seconds. But the American people need to become familiar. There's a civic duty all of us have to understand what it means to be an American and what are my political/civic responsibilities when it comes to, I'm not saying you got to quote all the amendments. You don't have to know the Constitution or Declaration of Independence verbatim. But the representative republic requires an informed and literate citizenry. And I'm not sure we have as informed and literate a citizenry as we should have. So I want to take birthright citizenship, and I want to begin by saying, if you see this issue the way I do, there's got to be an educational process, and you've got to talk to Americans, your fellow Americans, and you've got to kind of convince them that my position is not extreme. My position is not, beyond the pale. It's not off the rails and off the reservation. Birthright citizenship, the debate around birthright citizenship, and I'm talking about public opinion, has largely been what I'll say the activist media convincing Americans that those of us who oppose birthright citizenship are in support of, separating a family. And I'll give an example. A woman, a male comes across our northern border from Canada illegally. They know they entered our country illegally, and a woman comes from Mexico illegally into America. They know they're breaking our immigration laws. The male from Canada, the female from Mexico, both have entered our country illegally. Therefore, they are a violator of our immigration laws. They meet somewhere in America. They fall madly in love, or not, and they have a kid. The current interpretation of the 14th Amendment and the citizenship clause is that child, despite the male from Canada entering the country illegally, despite the female breaking our laws and entering our country illegally, that they've consummated a kid, and that kid per the liberal and current definition, and I guess the public sentiment, that kid becomes automatically an American citizen. The debate is not the language, and I don't want to get into originalist and original intent and textualist and whatnot. I'll give you an example. The originalists believe that the Second Amendment applies to more than just a musket. The original intent, once again, in that moment, was to make sure people had a right to keep and bear arms, but we didn't have semi-automatic weapons. We didn't have, high-powered rifles. It was basically a musket. So there's always been a debate about exactly what our framers meant when they created, the Constitution and the amendments that followed. So when you go to the 14th Amendment, there is no doubt that it guarantees and grants citizenship to anybody naturally born in America. There's no doubt that the baby born by the illegal from Canada and the illegal from Mexico meet that criteria. They were born in America. So in the most simple way imaginable, they become an American citizen. There was an 1898 Supreme Court decision that still has standing to some degree. That there were some other decisions made in the mid 1800s. The 14th Amendment is part of the Reconstruction era, post-Civil War, and it granted freed slaves full American citizenship. Once again, the intent, the original intent of the 14th Amendment, once again, a Reconstruction amendment that granted freed African-American slaves, black slaves, full American citizenship. Did the framers or founders intend for that baby that's born as a result of an illegal man from Canada coming to America, an illegal woman from Mexico coming to America? I don't think they've ever spoke clearly to that. I don't think any litigation or any court hearing or I guess, from the appellate court to the Supreme Court. I would imagine when Trump passes this executive order, well, I don't imagine, I know it is, 22 attorney generals have already challenged this. A judge has already, said it can't stand. I mean, now, once again, the Trump administration knew when they got this aggressive addressing birthright citizenship, there was going to be litigation. They were very prepared for litigation. But the point I try to make before we really delve into birthright citizenship, the point I'm trying to make is that the American media lean left. They are sympathetic to, I don't want to say they're all open border Democrats, but they are sympathetic to the situation or circumstances that some of these unfortunate people find themselves in. I respect that. I think any decent and moral and ethical person would have sympathy for that baby. That baby didn't bring about that issue on themselves. The problem was, a man from Canada decided to break our laws. A woman from Mexico decided to break our laws. They procreate and have a kid. It's not the damn kid's fault. The kid's not violating any interpretation of the 14th Amendment, but here we are. And we have a quandary or conundrum on our hands. And Donald Trump is arguing, and he said he was going to do this. He was going to be the most aggressive enforcer of conservative immigration law the country has ever seen. Some don't believe he's a man of his word, but on this particular issue, I think he absolutely is, because he's gone after one of the bedrocks of immigration really since 1869, I think, when, don't hold me to that. And it was Reconstruction after the Civil War when the amendment was passed and ratified, and it's held since then. In fact, once again, 1895, there was another decision that included a Chinese person, Wong Kim, what was the name. I don't want to get into the weeds, and I don't want to go too far down original intent. I just want to tell you what I think may happen, and I think this would be a very interesting political exercise for all of us to observe, and I think we owe it to ourselves. Something is important. I mean, if you're an American citizen, you need to know that there are two sides to the argument. There is a side that requires sympathy and requires a concern for that kid, that child that did not break any laws, that did not bring this issue upon themselves. But it's reality. And it's not, to me, it's not Congress's job to be sympathetic and not patriotic. In other words, Congress is elected to address the issues facing the American people. Congress is there to make determinations about what is in the best interest of the American citizenry or not. So it's not just about, a man and a woman having a baby and a conservative Republican who wants to do away with birthright citizenship, to abolish birthright citizenship. It's not that we want, and I consider myself one of those conservative Republicans that think birthright citizenship is not in our country's best interest. There is nowhere in the world where this sort of amendment stands and has been interpreted in the way that the courts currently have. So Trump goes after, that's political talk, jargon, goes after birthright citizenship with an executive order. 22 AGs in America, all Democrats, say, no, we've already decided that that baby we're discussing is indeed a citizen of the United States, just as you or I are. My take is we need to educate the public that it's not just about a man and a woman being sent back to Canada and Mexico, and here's the baby. What do we do with that baby? Obviously, the American public are going to be sympathetic to that baby. I don't know how sympathetic they are to the man that came across the border illegally, the woman that came across the border illegally, but surely we're going to all be sympathetic and caring and generous toward that baby. But the other side of the coin is, what would stop a woman from another country coming to America on a work visa? Let's say they come to America on a work visa. They get pregnant, have a baby. That baby becomes an American citizen. Something just doesn't. You can't say the only thing that matters is the plight of the baby. What do we do with that baby? There's another complication here, and that is the American public. And I would argue birthright citizenship does not serve the American public. There's another line in the 14th Amendment, the Citizenship Clause, that says subject to the jurisdiction of. That's where it gets confusing. But because some would argue that subject to the jurisdiction of means that you're not living in the shadows, that you're not operating or working on somebody else's Social Security number, that you're not hiding from the police day by day because you came to the country illegally. That's going to be the point. The courts have never made a decision. There is no doubt that the courts made a determination that freed slaves should be granted every degree of citizenship that I have. I am 1,000% supportive of that. As part of the Reconstruction age and era, we decided that those enslaved blacks deserve the right to be called an American. 1,000,000% on board with that. But the courts have never, from what I've read, they've never spoken clearly to that situation we've discussed for the last 10 minutes. They've never spoken clearly to a baby born in America to two parents, both entered the country illegally, neither are an American citizen. I have no idea how Amy Coney Barrett feels about that. I have no idea how Brett Kavanaugh feels about that. I think I have an idea how Alito feels about it. I think I understand how Thomas and Gorsuch feel about it. I think I understand how Sotomayor and Kagan feel about it, and Jackson feel about it. Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, I don't know how they'll interpret not the granting of citizenship, but rather under the jurisdiction of. And my argument is, and this is where I think Trump will argue, the courts can't look at freed slaves the same way they look at that very unfortunate circumstance of an infant child being born. Is that child a Canadian citizen? Is that child a Mexican citizen? No, that child's an American citizen per the liberal interpretation of the 14th Amendment. And that just doesn't make any sense to a lot of Americans. That doesn't make any sense to me. I can't speak for all Americans, but I know many who share that sentiment. Now, what might happen, and here's where I'll conclude with, here's what I predict will happen. Who the hell am I? I'm a college dropout from a town with no stoplight, hence the name of the podcast, No Stoplights. But as I study this for the last 3 or 4 days, and it's not just the last 3 or 4 days, I've tried to understand birthright citizenship. I've tried to understand the original intent. I've tried to understand, if I were there in that time, how would I interpreted? And I would have probably done exactly what the courts did. But it's a different time and a different era. And we got 20 million people in America who've come here illegally. We're rounding up. Mass deportation is another controversial immigration issue that Trump is choosing to aggressively address and take on. We'll get to that in just a bit. But I think we're going to have one of the most interesting litigation on politics that we've had a long, long time in American history. And I think it's all predicated on the three, what I'll call conservatively moderate or moderately conservative justices of the United States Supreme Court and what their interpretation of therefore under the jurisdiction of means. Here's my prediction. I don't think they'll side with the 1898 ruling. I don't think they'll side with Trump. I think the Supreme Court, by the slimmest of margins, will say immigration is a matter of legislature and under the jurisdiction does not have a fixed meaning. It's not for legal, it's not for the judicial system in America to say what under the jurisdiction means when it comes to matters relating to immigration. You can call it a punt. You can call it taking a pass. You can call it copping out. You can call it whatever you choose to call it. But something tells me that the courts will admit that there's never been an official SCOTUS ruling. Obviously, there's an official ruling that goes back to Reconstruction. But I would argue this court, because it is conservative in nature, it's probably not reliably conservative on all the issues, but it is no doubt more conservative than any court in my lifetime and maybe any court in the last 100 years of American jurisprudence. But it does seem to me that there is a needle they can thread by suggesting to Congress, you deal with it. You guys are the lawmakers. If there is a lack of clarity on exactly what the law needs to be regarding a man coming to the country illegally from Canada, a woman coming to the country illegally from Mexico, they have a kid, what do we do with that kid? That's a political matter. It needs to, and once again, I just think, here's where I get confused and concerned and a bit bothered. It's not just about sympathy. It's not just about, let's do the right thing. It's about the American people and what is in the best interest of the American citizenry. And for people to come into our country illegally, to have kids, and that kid automatically becomes an American citizen is not in the American people's best interest. It's simply not. And our government needs to understand that its priority, its motivation, and it's the first job it should consider when it votes on any legislation or policy is the American people. So I don't think we'll have a ruling against Trump. I don't think we'll have a ruling for Trump. I think three moderate justices, conservative for the most part, but not hardcore conservatives. I think those three justices, and I think it's probably the right thing to do. I really and truly, I respect the decision made back in the 1800s post-Reconstruction, but I also respect the debate that I'm trying to have here on our podcast that birthright citizenship just doesn't make any damn sense. Now, Anton Scalia said that every judge, when sworn in as a judge, should be given a stamp that says stupid but constitutional, dumb but constitutional, and there's some merit to that. There's some truth in what he's saying there. But as we follow the issue of birthright citizenship, and as we keep up with the executive orders and the lawsuits and what the AGs are doing in some of these blue states, it's politics. But eventually this issue will get to the United States Supreme Court. And once again, I'm not a scholar. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a bright legal mind. I'm a guy with a radio show, a podcast with a big mouth and a lot of opinions. But I do study, and I'm fairly diligent in trying to understand some of the historical analysis. And I do believe that and I'm not the only one. There are some other smart people that believe the right thing to do is once again, not side with Trump, not side against Trump, but say as a matter of policy, Congress needs to decide what we do about immigration. It's a huge problem and it needs to be addressed. And if it's a policy issue, and it's legislative in nature, the court doesn't need to do it. The president doesn't need to do it. 435 members of Congress need to get their head together and decide what our proper stance is on someone coming to the country illegally, someone else coming to the country illegally. They have a kid. Does that kid become an American citizen or not?